I've been so let down by Marvel lately. I was one of those people who would go out to see every new Marvel movie on its first weekend, but recently I haven't felt the same interest. It now feels like I'm climbing a mountain when I'm watching their movies. Every other month there's a new piece of Marvel homework to watch, and every time the quality seems to be worse. This hit an all-time low for me when I went to see Thor Love and Thunder. It just felt like a big joke with no real depth or intrigue, not to mention the awful CGI and tonal whiplash. I think Marvel have really been struggling with balance lately when it comes to how they mix humour with serious moments. Their jokes used to have a deeper level that would enhance the seriousness of a scene and even add character development. Take Iron Man for example. He would regularly make jokes, but these were so much more enjoyable because he would often use humour to hide his insecurities, especially around Pepper Potts, which made the moments where he finally opens up all the more enjoyable. Iron Man is the perfect example of how to balance serious moments with humour, and Thor Love and Thunder was perhaps the worst example. That was until Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 was released. First off, the beginning of the movie felt incredibly messy. It felt like stuff was just happening without anything to set up the story. Peter is depressed, a gold guy shows up, and Rocket is injured, so now they must get a thing to unlock a thing that allows them to save his life. In Age of Ultron we meet Vision, a humanoid robot who is created in a pod, and we get to see his first moments as he looks out onto the world and tries to figure out his place in it, balancing the morals of whether he'll choose to be good or bad, and in the end he chooses to side with the heroes to stop Ultron and protect life. With Adam Warlock, he just shows up trying to kill people while making jokes, so the audience has no idea how to feel about him, not to mention the fact that he doesn't play a major role in the story. Similar to Vision in Age of Ultron, Adam is like a newborn child in this movie, trying to figure out the world around him. But the reason I feel Vision was better executed was because we get to see his story from the very beginning. It would have been nice to have learned a bit more about Adam Warlock before we see the Guardians. Maybe the backstory of him leaving the growth pod, and what his first moments were like with his mother, setting up their relationship together, and how he would feel when she is later killed. I think this extra minor plot element could have really helped to ground the story and reduce the pacing issues in the first half hour. As I mentioned, the story follows a pretty simple structure, where the heroes need to get a thing, which leads them to another thing, to do a thing, and then there's a big battle at the end. But by far the best part of the movie is the separate plot surrounding Rocket. We get to see his origins and the trauma he suffered through his early life. In the first two Guardians movies we get a glimpse of his backstory, learning that he went through some sort of painful procedure that allowed him to walk. But I had no idea how horrific it was until I watched this movie. Basically, there is this guy called the High Evolutionary who is trying to create the perfect society, but he is experimenting on animals in order to achieve his goals. It does kind of remind me of another famous figure who also tried to create utopia using animals. Anyways, so Rocket is one of the High Evolutionary's early test subjects, along with a walrus, a rabbit, and an otter, named Floor, Teeth, and Lila. The four share a cage together and they dream of going to the utopian world that is being created for them, and they are especially looking forward to seeing the sky for the first time. It's clear that Rocket is different to the other test subjects as he is able to come up with original ideas and has a passion for building things, as we see from him collecting random parts of technology he finds laying around. The High Evolutionary sees his talent and uses Rocket to complete his experiments, allowing him to turn animals into humanoids with the push of a button. But now that Rocket has served his purpose, he no longer has a use for him. So he tells him that the four were never going to the new world, before throwing him back into his cage to be later incinerated alongside his friends. Rocket is distraught over this information, but he won't let himself and his friends be killed. So he pulls together all of the scraps that he collected and builds a key to escape the cage. They're about to make a break for it, but suddenly we hear a gunshot and Lila falls to the floor. The High Evolutionary knew that Rocket would try to escape, so he followed him. The sounds of Rocket's heartbroken screams made me genuinely tear up. It was such a powerful moment. The gun goes off 2 more times, and now Rocket is alone with his creator, who is laughing at his pain. Rocket loses it, and mauls him to the ground before making a run for it and stealing a spaceship. That was probably the peak of this movie for me, and it could have been a finale in itself. While Rocket is reliving his past through his dreams, the Guardians are trying to save his life. They can't use traditional medical equipment because Rocket has a built-in chip that will kill him if someone tries to interfere with his biology. So the Guardians go to a science facility made of flesh in order to get a code that can deactivate the chip so they can save his life. Something that really bothered me about this scene was how incompetent the guards were. If they had just investigated a little bit further and done their job properly when they had first discovered the Guardians, then they would have been able to stop them right then and there. But no, they need to be dumb so the story can happen. This whole sequence in the fleshy medical facility just feels like time wasting. I'm sure they could have cut it out, to be honest, with a few rewrites, and it wouldn't have changed the story. But anyway, so the Guardians almost succeed, but one of the High Evolutionary's henchmen steal the code first. So now the Guardians must find the henchman. They go to a planet which is a near replica of Earth, and they get the code after infiltrating the base. But while they're on the base, they mention to the bad guy that his world below is not perfect. So the High Evolutionary casually commits mass genocide and leaves the planet in the safety of his spaceship. The Guardians use the code to save Rocket's life, but now they must stop the High Evolutionary. The Guardians face off against the villain, and Rocket's story comes full circle when he finally gets to save all the animals that were captured by the High Evolutionary. The animals run across onto nowhere and the bad guy gets what he deserves. This part felt really tacked on in order to give Adam something to do in the last minute, but Peter is the last to leave the exploding spaceship and he drops his iPod. So he goes back for it and gets left behind. He must have conveniently lost his space helmet from the first two movies because he is forced to jump across the vacuum of space unprotected. He gets stranded and he is quickly suffocating. What is he going to do? Oh, never mind. Adam flies over and saves him. Phew, that was lucky. So Rocket is saved, the High Evolutionary is defeated, and they all have a party before deciding it's time for the Guardians to go their separate ways. Peter goes back to Earth to reunite with his family, and Rocket becomes the leader of the Guardians. And that is where the movie ends. There's also some subplots that I would like to mention, such as Kraglin trying to fill Yando's position as leader, Peter dealing with the loss of Gamora, Nebula and Gamora's roles being reversed, and even Drax and Mantis were given time to develop. I definitely noticed some strangely on-the-nose religious symbolism throughout this movie. Like when the Evolutionary is bombing the planet below, the planet that he created in order to start fresh, as well as the animals leaving the spaceship, were clearly inspired by the story of Noah's Ark. But the most obvious one was the moment that Adam tries to save Peter from dying in space, and they perfectly recreate Michelangelo's painting of the Sistine Chapel ceiling. I'm not sure where they were going with this, or if there was some deeper meaning behind it, but if you have any ideas, please let me know in the comments because I'm really curious how you interpreted it. Overall, the movie was pretty great, if you can ignore the tonal whiplash between scenes with Rocket versus the scenes with the Guardians, and the fact that Adam Warlock was pretty pointless. But something I find unfortunate is how far Marvel has fallen. They used to be able to make us feel emotional during a movie, with great character work and character development. But in this movie they had to literally shoot a bunny rabbit in order to make us feel something. I mean, it worked, but where do they go from here? Marvel seems to be at a dead end. Are they just going to resume throwing out new movies and TV shows every month until everyone gets bored and leaves? Or will they be able to recapture our intrigue with a large crossover event or an Avengers movie? I really hope they can turn it around. But with more and more frequent Marvel disappointments, as well as the fact that death doesn't matter when you have access to an endless multiverse, I'm definitely starting to lose interest in the MCU, and I think a lot of people are in the same boat.